Salutations! Hello! Today we're going to talk about sectioned dreadlocks versus unsectioned dreadlocks. This is a popular question, often asked by people who have already started their dreadlocks without sectioning, who are then worrying and wondering whether they should have started, with sectioning. Because what often happens is people decide that they're going to start dreadlocks and they get really excited and then they rush home and then they look up, what methods can be used to start dreadlocks, and more often than not they'll decide on a method, back comb or twist and rip. And when no one's looking, they'll just try out, I'll just twist and rip this little patch of hair and see how it turns out. And then they'll make a little baby dread and they go, that was easy and fun, and look at this dreadlock. And then they get more excited and maybe they'll make another one and another one. And it's very addictive, and before you know it, you've kind of dreadlocked your whole head of hair and you have not sectioned the hair. Because sectioning is boring, twist and rip is fun, so why not just twist and rip the hair? So most of these questions crop up, after they've already done this, and maybe you're one of those people. And what happens is maybe then the dreadlocks all start to merge together at the root a little bit more than you'd planned, and then you start to worry. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of sectioning versus non-sectioned dreadlocks here. A quick intro to sectioning for people that do not know what it is. Sectioning is when you carve up your head of hair into, more often than not, squares, and then those squares then become the roots of your dreadlocks. It can be done in two ways when you're starting dreadlocks. So either you will find a patch of hair and you'll kind of take a square section and make a dreadlock one at a time, or some people will section their whole head at once, so make a square, put a little rubber band on it, make another square, put a rubber band on it until you have your whole head squared out and plan out where all the dreads are going to be, and then start the dreadlocks. Sectioning is one of the main benefits that you get from the twist and rip, the back comb, crochet method versus the neglect method, because sectioning allows you to properly plan out where each dreadlock is going to go. Wherever you put the section, that's where a dreadlock's going to form, so you can decide where they're going to be, and also you can decide how big the section is going to be, and that gives you some control over how thick the dreadlock is going to be that grows from that section. Which is opposed to the natural / neglect / freeform method, where you kind of just get what you're given. So when it's compared against non-sectioned dreadlocks, also made with the back comb or twist and rip method, the differences are, when you section dreadlocks, you will make that square and then you will bring in all the hairs that grow from within that square, and you'll sort of get little part lines between the different squares. And that means that whatever dreadlock grows from there, it's only using hairs that grow from directly underneath that dreadlock. If you don't section the hair and you just grab random chunks, you can often end up with weird shaped sections that can often kind of overlap, and this really sort of increases the likelihood that those dreadlocks are going to grow together when they share hairs between sections, and that will lead to a lot of congoing. So I'm going to come back to dreadlocks growing together in a second, but I'm just going to go through some of the other cons. If you don't section the dreadlocks, you can also end up with a lot more loose hair, because when you don't section, you just kind of grab chunks, and then you can often end up leaving out little patches of loose hair that have never been put within a dreadlock. When you section the hair, you make sure that each hair is within a section, so it's within a root of a dreadlock, so we'll hopefully end up in that dreadlock at some point. Last cons, and these are downsides that are directly versus the section dreadlocks, is that you don't have a whole lot of control over how thick or where the dreadlocks are going to be positioned. Obviously you decide which chunk of hair you're picking up to twist and rip or back comb and where that chunk comes from, but it's kind of vague as to how much hair you grab there. You might grab this much hair here and this much hair here, so you can end up with dreadlocks that are different sizes, and because the sections are kind of higgledy-piggledy, they can kind of be in weird positions. This may actually be an upside to some people because it leads to more natural looking dreadlocks, because if you do section your hair, the downside of sectioning is if you look closely and pull the dreadlocks apart, each dreadlock is actually sort of a square at the base, and this is not a very natural occurrence. A square is kind of not a very natural occurring shape when it comes to dreadlocks forming. And obviously section dreadlocks are a lot more organized, and that's also not all that naturally occurring. And if you section all your dreadlocks the same size, they're all going to be the same size, and that's not very natural occurring. So it kind of depends on the person as to whether they want dreadlocks that are organized versus unorganized. But I will say that you can get the best of both worlds because if you section, but you section using different sizes, you can get roughly the same effect. When you section your hair into squares, there is no law that says each square has to be the same size and equally positioned, blah 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 blah. You can make, you know, a big square here, a little square here, a triangle there if you really wish. Back to dreadlocks growing together. This is the main thing, and tends to be what leads people to be worried when they haven't sectioned the dreadlocks, because if you don't section the dreadlocks and you don't sort of plan out where each root is going to be and you get some overlap, it can very quickly lead to lots of dreadlocks growing together very quickly all at the same time. Now, sectioning your dreadlocks is no guarantee by any means that your dreadlocks are not going to all start webbing together at the roots, but it reduces the likelihood that it's going to go completely insane, because when you section your dreadlocks, you make sure that each hair has been put into a section, and then when dreadlocks grow together, when you rip them, it's going to pull dreads back into their sections and separate any little hairs that have decided to go rogue and join two dreads. If you have not sectioned the dreadlocks, there's no real distinct line drawn between dreads, so it can become a real mess up there real fast with lots of dreadlocks all kind of crossing over at roots. Again, section dreadlocks can still end up roughly in the same boat, but it depends on how you form them, how you sectioned them, and you know how good you were at your chosen dreadlocking method. So unsectioned dreadlocks can very quickly lead to people worrying when all the dreadlocks are growing together, and will often lead to the question, should I take my unsectioned dreadlocks out to restart them sectioned? And this is an interesting question because there's a lot of time to be considered. So you've made all your dreadlocks, you've had them for a little while and they've started to stick together. Would it be worth spending all that time taking the dreadlocks out, all the time sectioning the hair, all the time restarting the dreadlocks, and then all the time waiting for them to start dreading again? I would often say not, but it depends where your pain threshold is. You can control dreadlocks that have not been sectioned. They will require a lot of extra ripping apart, especially when they're young. Once you've got them ripped apart enough times, you will then find that they have sectioned each other off in the same way that sectioned dreadlocks would be, but not in perfect squares. But there is a lot of work involved there with all the separating that you're going to have to do. I know sectioning is boring, it takes time, but the time you spend sectioning your dreadlocks at the start, you know, would have to be paid back, you know, tenfold if you didn't section. So you either spend X amount of time sectioning at the beginning of the dreadlocks, or you spend 10 times that amount of time through the following weeks with all the extra separating that you will likely end up having to do. So those are my thoughts on sectioned versus unsectioned. Personally, if you're going to use a starting method such as backcomb or twist and rip, and not the neglect method, I mean you cannot section dreadlocks anyway, but if you're going to start using those methods, I would recommend sectioning. You don't have to section in a perfectly square, equal manner. You can make the sections different sizes so you can still make your dreads look however you like them to look, and I don't think a lot of people really enjoy extra separating, so anything that you can do at the start to maybe reduce the amount of time that you have to spend sectioning, especially with young dreadlocks, I mean that's a bonus. I consider that a bonus. So if you're starting dreadlocks, I would personally recommend sectioning. It is not a necessity, but hopefully through these pros and cons you can see the benefits of sectioning versus non-sectioning. If you have any questions, comments, queries, anything that you would like to add regarding sectioning, dreadlocks, me, myself, my dreadlocks, you can leave it in the comments section here. You can find all my stuff on lazydreads.com. You can tweet me, and that's at lazy_dreads. And the stuff going on Facebook, the Facebook page is facebook.com/lazydreads, and you know, you can get involved there if you're a Facebook person. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it helped you a little bit, maybe, possibly. Thank you for watching. Farewell.